hasn't reran in literally 2 years. Is that something that we should be sad about? Well, let's find out about that today by evaluating his current meta position. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First off, we gotta talk about how the lad feels to use in different teams. There's a few of them to speak of. For starters, Heizou Hyper. It's very silly. Obviously, the likes of Xiao or Scaramouche are gonna be a lot better here, but the real question is, will that be as funny though? It's better than the level that you might expect for a 4-star DPS that isn't that boy Gaming. I mean, to be fair, I'm not that surprised that the team is solid. After all, you're running one of the most broken niche supports in the game, assuming that you've got multiple copies of her. Farina, and then some other nutty buffer. You'll do funky numbers with this, and it feels neat to play, so if you somehow have a C6 Farazan laying around but no Animo DPS to utilize her properly, well then why not invite Heizou around? You can also go for the Xian Yun Plunge variant. You're literally just playing Rampo Xiao at that point. Detective Plunge, if you will, eliminating suspicious criminals through kicks to their skulls. Speaking of sus, yeah, you're gonna hear me reference that a few times throughout this video. The artist that drew that piece was feeling rather diabolical that day, huh? Anyways, enough of that. We gotta talk about Taser Driver Heizou. There's no real reason to play this over the like 50 other Taser drivers that we have. The main difference between using this dude and the Chemical Fox is that the lad will contribute some of his own damage. It ain't bad in AoE, but Abyss is way more single target centric nowadays, so I'd say that this is more of an Imaginarium Theater suited team. You can consider cooking a delicious meal with Heizou National too. Because funnily enough, my man being an animal means that he can hold 4VV to be the team swirler. So that's goated. It's obviously not going to be the strongest variant of this team, but it honestly doesn't feel all that bad to use. Very cool and epic. You can even use him as a Sucrose replacement in any team that wants EM sharing because of his passive, which provides everybody 80 EM after using his burst without condition. But let's be real, literally nobody is using Bro like this unless they happen to run into him on standard as a newer player with a smaller character roster. His playstyle is honestly not too bad. I understand why he slept on. After all, Bro hasn't been released from jail for over 2 years. Remember that insane prison sentence that Kaveh was dished for over 400 plus days? Yeah, I like to imagine that Heizou was sent to jail for tax fraud, if you remember his hangout when he was trying to teach people how to avoid getting scammed. What he failed to realize is that it takes one to know one, so he got meropeated off of banners. Not very goated. Alright, what if you want to bail him out? Well, we all know how expensive 4-star cons are. At least, I do. So we should talk about how those help him out. First off, what is that C1 name that feels like a page in a textbook? Second off, this will be very useful in his quest to break out of prison. Movement speed on a character that does a whole lot of kicks and punches to execute the main source of his damage is pretty neat. Pretty cool copy to pick up. Funnily, his C2 helps him with that goofy Sucrose replacement use case that I talked about earlier. It'll be nice for Taser too, since as that's an AoE-centric team, more grouping is always appreciated. His C3 makes his skill stronger. I don't know what else to say here, man. It's pretty self-explanatory. Very basic con, obviously very good for the dude. That's a sick C4 name. Anyways, this indirectly helps my man's grouping again since he gets his burst back far more often. And since this comes after his C2, yippee! What do you know, a neat bonus. Plus, more bursts equals more damage on the whole, so of course it's good for a regular DPS Heizou as well. Means you can pour more into your offensive stats. His kick will kick harder at C5. Wow. This C6, despite having an incredibly cartoony name, I don't know if that's just me, is really strong for him. If you're playing him with Farina, then the crit rate might not be that big of a deal since you'd be playing the lad on Hunters. But in any other team where he does damage, yeah, that'll be neat. The huge crit damage stick is universally good in all of his best in slot comps. Also, to be fair, you can get a max of 16% crit rate from this con, and Hunters gives you 36%, so that's literally 48% free rate at max stacks. I'd say that's pretty cool. Yes, Heizou will absolutely be able to break out of jail. I mean, be legally bailed out of prison if you collect all of his cons. I'd say they're all quite relevant increases to him, with his C2 being more of a neat bonus. As always, don't pull for a 4-star on a 5 stars banner if you don't want the rate-up character. But, too bad, since even if you wanted to dump an entire liver on the table to max him out, he's still trapped in the dentist waiting room of Shenhe. Take guide to know if it's hot or not, but dentist waiting rooms are the most boring places in existence. I think that time slows down when you enter one. Anyways. Yet, what was the detective's life like before he got arrested? It was all sunshine and rainbows, I tell you. Yawning on trees, doing the Ranpo thinking thing, being pretty hyped up by the community because he was the first character to fight with literally punches and kicks. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even like Bungo Stray Dogs, it made no sense, I just like Ranpo. And being kinda mid. Alright, that's a little harsh. I actually think he was a pretty decent 4-star for his time. Xiao was nowhere near as good as he is now, as Farazan wasn't a thing. Perhaps things were better that way. And because taser teams were still regarded quite highly, being able to drive it was a super neat quality. Also, while this is not meta-related, he had the most banger hangout in hangout history. I will not be accepting otherwise. Tax fraud play, my beloved. It's still better than all the new ones. That doesn't mean the new ones are bad, it just means that Hoyo peaked with this dude's hangout quests. His hypercarry teams weren't that bad either. Honestly, received quite nicely as a 4-star on the whole. It was cool having an Animo character who could be an on-field DPS while triggering 4VV effectively. Sure, he would never really beat just using Sucrose, but for his era, the guy was innovative in his ways. I remember myself being really excited when he was rolling around, actually. He fell off really quickly, sadly, first due to Hyperbloom obliterating traditional taser teams, and second off, because better teams that had higher damage ceilings were coming out. Not only that, but they were hella cheap options. Heizou obliterating the Spiral Abyss on a 3-star weapon, anyone? Like, he was definitely neat for Inazuma's time, but he came out the moment that we were about to move on to Sumeru. Personally, I would have swapped Kuki Shinobu's and Heizou's release dates. I know that Kuki and Ito were in the same faction, so it made sense to put her on his rerun banner, but Siegewing came out way after Riesli, so I don't think that really matters when it comes to banner planning in the first place. Heizou could have had a longer time to be considered cool and good, while Kuki could have been buffed a whole lot sooner. Definitely not bad by Inazuman standards, but it's a shame that he released so close to a new meta. Also, Xiao got massive buffs thanks to Farazan, and Wanderer became a thing. The lad is cooked, I fear. Right, but what about now? Was he so strong that he had to be thrown into the dentist waiting room to be contained for eternity? Or is he way too horrible to be sold on banners again? I mean, honestly, it's not like he changed that much, he's just kinda there. There's our beloved Hydro Archon Lady Farina in the picture now. That's cool. And Xian Yun for plunge teams. Plus, Farazan helped Heizou too. I feel like the poor lad got overshadowed by the 5-star Animo DPSs, but I can't blame people for forgetting about the lad when he's been gone for as long as he has. I describe him as being one of those options that can work if you want to make them work. I think that if you're a big fan of him, wanting him to feel like a total legend in the current day, then pick up a Farina, Xianyun, plus a few Farazan copies, then you'll be good to go. I've kind of ragged on him in the past, but I've got to give the lad his flowers. Heizou feels nice to play while being able to pack a pretty meaty punch if you give him the time of day, and a pretty tragic yawn. I told you, I wouldn't let you forget about it. Heizou's overall standing in the meta is a very simple one. He's definitely not Nouvelette. You aren't going to be choosing him if you want to cheese the Abyss in its entirety. He's a more lactose intolerant choice, you know? The lad isn't bad by any means. I've called him lad like 4 times now. I do find it kind of silly that we haven't had bro come back for 10 centuries by this stage, especially when he really isn't that bad compared to other 4-star characters. Like, his playstyle is pretty charming. His power level is decent if you invest into him. And his biggest crime is simply being forgettable, aside from being charged with first-degree birthday art and avoiding his taxes. If you happen to own a copy from a while back or recently managed to fish him off of the standard banner, consider this as your sign to build him and give him a spin. You're the owner of a pretty rare 4-star character. He isn't too hard to learn after all. If you somehow have C6, then congratulations, you're one of the chosen ones. I can't see his overall standing improving anytime soon. Even if his archetypes were to get buffed, they'd be improving the teams of the 5-stars that run said comps better than him at the same time. Taser buffs? Do you mean Ride and Double Hydro buffs? Animo DPS buffs? Do you mean that we're going to lament and cry louder all over the place? I think that's why literally nobody talks about him though, because there isn't much to say in terms of his future potential. He will always be 2 steps behind other units. But you know what I say to that? Okay, sure, but can Scaramouche avoid his taxes in the way that Heizou can? No, exactly, so who's the real winner here? Dude's constantly being watched by the plant kid that runs the country, and Zhongli is the contract god, so I have a hard time believing that Xiao avoids taxes, meaning that out of all 3 Animo DPSs, technically Heizou embodies the spirit of freedom the most. Well, that was certainly something. Anyways, I didn't have any particular motive when it came to making this video. I just asked some friends what 4 stars they like, and one of them said Heizou, so I was like, okay, whoa, Heizou, neat. The most I have to say at the end of the day is that he's a cool dude, and I wish he would actually show up in events sometimes. They introduced the most hilarious menace of a dude, then never brought him back for anything? Goofy, man. Bring back Heizou. In any case, what do you think of Heizou? Do you like him, hate him, or perhaps do you not even care the slightest bit about him? Let me know down below in the comments. Hopefully this video was able to update you on Heizou's current position in the Genshin Impact meta. This has been Juice, signing out, and don't let this fool you. This image of deception. This is the truth of this world, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise.